Tonight, under the name of Elion, we journey into truths that were never meant to be rushed. These are ancient words, preserved in silence, carrying wisdom, warning, and hope. What follows is not meant to disturb the mind, but to settle it. Before kingdoms rose and fell, before names were written in dust, there was a time when heaven and earth stood nearer to one another. The boundaries were clear. The order was firm. Light moved according to command, and the stars did not wander from their paths. In those first ages, knowledge was given in measure, and silence itself was a form of obedience. Yet among the watchers of the heights there arose a quiet stirring. It was not born of chaos, but of longing, a turning of the gaze, a desire to look downward longer than was permitted. From this turning came words not spoken aloud, and from these words came oaths, sealed not in flesh but in will. What was seen was beautiful. What was desired seemed harmless. But order, once bent, does not remain still. The ancient writings speak of knowledge taught too early, power shared without restraint, and wisdom placed into hands unprepared to carry its weight. They tell of angels who forgot their station, and of an earth that bore the cost of that forgetting. Giants walked where humility once lived. Violence grew as language. The harmony of creation learned a new sound. These accounts were written, preserved, and then set aside, not lost by accident but hidden with intention. Copied by careful hands, guarded by silence, and named forbidden by those who feared their reach. The Book of Enoch stands among these writings, neither fully erased nor fully embraced. It speaks of judgment pronounced before the flood, of thrones set in fire, and of a world weighed and found unstable. Why were these words feared? Why were they remembered yet removed? And what does it mean that they endured even when sealed away? This telling does not hurry. It moves as memory moves, slow and layered. Each step unfolds what was revealed, what was broken, and what was promised afterward. The fall of angels is not told for spectacle, but for understanding. The record of judgment is not given for terror, but for order restored. What was written before the waters rose still waits in quiet pages, and in their telling, rest is found, not in ignorance, but in peace with what has been revealed and what has been withheld. In the first ages, when time still moved without weight, heaven and earth stood near to one another, not joined yet not distant. The space between them was clear, not crossed without command. Creation unfolded in layers, each set in place with care, each held within its boundary. Light knew when to rise and when to withdraw. Waters remained where they were spoken to remain. The land brought forth according to its order, and nothing pressed beyond its measure. In this early world, silence was not emptiness. It was agreement. The harmony of creation did not depend on force but on alignment. All things moved as they were appointed. The sky did not envy the earth. The earth did not reach toward the heavens. Each realm was complete in its purpose. Above the world of dust and breath, the heavens were ordered with equal precision. Thrones were established, not for rule alone, but for stewardship. Authority was not seized, but given. Among the hosts of heaven were those assigned not to speak, but to watch. They were set as witnesses to the unfolding of the created world, guardians of balance rather than shapers of outcome. These watchers were not distant in awareness, yet they remained removed in action. Their task was to observe, to uphold order through presence, not intervention. They stood within the flow of divine will, attentive to its movement, restrained by its design. Knowledge was known to them, yet not all knowledge was shared. Restraint was itself a form of wisdom. Below, humanity walked the earth in its earliest understanding. Life was simple, though not without meaning. The first generations learned through living, not through mastery. The limits placed upon them were not punishments but protections. Knowledge was given slowly as the ground could bear it. To know everything at once was never the intention. Growth was meant to be measured. In the telling preserved within Genesis and echoed in later traditions, this world was not without struggle, but it was without disorder. Labor existed, yet it was not crushing. Authority existed, yet it was not abused. The line between the seen and the unseen was firm, though thin. It was known that there were things above and things below, and that crossing between them was not a matter of desire but of command. Trust rested at the center of this design. Creation trusted its maker. Humanity trusted the order given. The watchers trusted the boundaries of their charge. Nothing strained against the structure that held it. Even mystery had its place. Not all questions were meant to be answered, and not all answers were meant to be carried. The ancient writings speak of this time as one of learning. Obedience was not yet hardened into law, but understood as alignment. To obey was to remain within harmony. To deviate was to introduce weight where there had been balance. Yet at this stage, deviation had not yet taken form. The world itself bore witness to its own wholeness. Seasons moved without disruption. The earth yielded what was required, no more and no less. Life multiplied within its bounds. Nothing yet consumed beyond its need. Violence had not become language. Desire had not yet learned excess. This was the world before the veil was closed. A world where separation was clear and closeness was permitted only where intended. Heaven remained above, attentive but restrained. Earth remained below, growing but dependent. Between them stood order, quiet and unbroken. The sacred balance did not announce itself. It simply endured, and because it endured, it was often unnoticed. Yet it was this wholeness, this careful design, that would later reveal the depth of what was lost when boundaries were crossed and when watching turned toward longing. Within this ordered nearness of heaven and earth, purpose governed all movement. Nothing existed without assignment. Even those unseen by human sight were bound to function, not freedom without limit. Among the heavenly hosts, ranks were not measures of worth, but of responsibility. To be placed higher was to be bound more tightly to restraint. The watchers were shaped by this understanding. They were not sent to rule the earth nor to instruct it. Their presence was a form of guardianship, silent and steady. They observed the unfolding of life below, not as participants but as keepers of record. What was seen was carried upward, not altered below. Their role preserved distance, and distance preserved order. This separation was not cold. It was careful. Heaven did not withdraw from creation in neglect, but in trust. The design of the world was sufficient to sustain itself within the will that formed it. Intervention was unnecessary where obedience remained. The watchers understood this balance and were formed to uphold it through patience. Knowledge itself moved according to this design. In the early world, understanding came in portions. Humanity was not made ignorant, but gradual. Wisdom was meant to unfold alongside maturity. What was withheld was not denied forever, but reserved for its appointed time. To rush knowledge was to burden the soul before it could carry weight. The ancient traditions speak of this restraint as mercy. The limits placed upon humanity were boundaries of care. The earth, still young in its cycles, required time to learn balance. Humanity, still new in breath, required time to learn humility. The unseen realms remained unseen for this reason. Revelation was selective, not secretive. Angels themselves existed within this pattern. Though formed of light and will, they were not without command. Their awareness did not grant them authority to alter design. To see was not to touch. To know was not to act. The watchers carried this truth as part of their being. Their obedience was quiet but complete. In this age, harmony was not enforced. It was chosen. Each created order remained where it belonged because it recognized its place. The earth did not seek the heavens. Humanity did not seek the authority of angels. The watchers did not seek the experience of flesh. Desire had not yet learned to wander. This balance shaped the rhythm of existence. Time moved without urgency. Days followed nights without strain. Generations passed without accumulation of excess. Even death, when it came, was not yet heavy with fear. It was a return, not a punishment. The world had not yet learned to cling. The sacred writings hint that this closeness between realms carried a quiet awareness. Humanity sensed the presence of the divine without confusion. The heavens observed humanity without envy. Each remained aware of the other, yet content within separation. This awareness did not produce interference, but reverence. The veil between realms, though thin, was firm. It existed not to imprison, but to preserve. To cross it required calling, not curiosity. To breach it required command, not desire. This boundary protected both realms from imbalance. It ensured that creation unfolded as intended, not accelerated by will. Nothing in this world suggested collapse. No sign announced disruption. The design was sound. The order was sufficient. Yet within the freedom granted to beings of will, the possibility of deviation remained. Obedience, though natural, was not forced. The watchers, though faithful, were not bound beyond choice. Thus the sacred balance endured, not because rebellion was impossible, but because it had not yet been chosen. The world stood whole, complete within its design, unaware that even harmony can be fragile when longing is permitted to look beyond its boundary. The wholeness of that early world rested upon unseen agreement. Order was not maintained through constant correction, but through alignment freely held. Each realm remained stable because its inhabitants accepted the limits placed upon them. This acceptance was not enforced by fear, but sustained by trust. Trust was the quiet foundation beneath all movement. The ancient traditions describe creation itself as responsive to this trust. The ground yielded because it was not strained. The skies remained ordered because they were not contested. Life increased without rivalry. Nothing yet sought dominion beyond its sphere. Power was present, but it was not grasped. Within this harmony, the watchers continued their appointed task. They beheld the patterns of life as they unfolded, recording without shaping. Their awareness was vast, yet their restraint was greater. They knew the weight of deviation, even before it appeared. Knowledge of consequence was part of their understanding, woven into their obedience. Humanity, still near to its beginning, lived without awareness of distant ages. Memory was short, but presence was deep. Life was marked by immediacy rather than accumulation. The future did not yet press upon the present. This simplicity preserved balance. Without ambition to exceed measure, the soul remained light. The sacred writings imply that even wisdom itself was sheltered during this age. Mysteries existed, but they did not press forward. Revelation was not demanded. It arrived only when summoned by purpose. Silence was not absence, but patience. To wait was to remain aligned with design. Yet within the gift of will, even patience can be tested. Freedom allowed for choice, and choice allowed for turning. Though nothing yet moved toward rebellion, the capacity for deviation remained dormant. The structure of creation permitted obedience, but it also permitted refusal. This was not flaw, but design. Love and faithfulness cannot exist where choice is absent. The veil between realms functioned as the final safeguard of this order. It was not a wall of separation, but a boundary of role. Heaven and earth remained near, yet distinct. The watchers knew the beauty of the world below, but they did not seek to enter it. Humanity sensed the presence above, but did not seek to ascend. Each remained content within placement. The calm of this world did not suggest stagnation. Growth occurred, but without rupture. Learning unfolded without force. Authority was exercised without domination. The sacred balance allowed for development without distortion. All things moved toward their appointed fullness at a measured pace. This was the condition of creation before deviation entered history. A world whole not because it was perfected, but because it was aligned. The cost of disorder had not yet been paid, because disorder had not yet been chosen. Judgment had not yet been spoken, because rebellion had not yet formed. In later ages, memory of this time would fade, preserved only in fragments of text and echo. Yet its importance would remain. For without understanding what was whole, the weight of what was broken cannot be measured. Without knowing the balance that existed, the gravity of its loss cannot be fully grasped. Thus the world before the veil was closed stands as a quiet witness, not a myth of perfection, but a testimony of order, a reminder that corruption does not begin in chaos, but in turning, and that what was once held in trust can be lost when boundaries are no longer honored. Here ends the telling of what was established. What follows arises not from confusion but from choice, and the stillness of this first age remains, not as longing, but as context for all that would unfold. In the order of the heavens, not all were sent to speak. Some were appointed to remain still. Their task was not proclamation, nor command, but witness. These were the watchers, set apart within the host, named not for power exercised, but for attention maintained. The ancient writings describe them as those who stood awake, not restless but aware. Their vigilance was not born of suspicion, but of trust. They were placed to observe the unfolding of the world below, to bear witness to its growth, its patterns, and its alignment with the order spoken at creation. What they saw was not meant to be altered by their will, but carried as testimony. Their authority rested in restraint. Unlike those who were sent as messengers or those who carried out judgment, the watchers were bound to silence. They were not rulers of the earth, nor teachers of its inhabitants. Their presence alone was considered sufficient. By observing without interference, they upheld balance. By remaining unseen, they preserved order. In the Book of Enoch, their charge is described with care. They are portrayed not as distant abstractions, but as conscious beings entrusted with responsibility. Their nearness to creation was deliberate, yet their separation from it was firm. They stood between realms, not to bridge them, but to ensure they remained distinct. To watch was not a passive role. It required discipline of will. Knowledge was accessible to them, yet action was restricted. They understood the workings of creation, the movement of the stars, the cycles of the earth. Yet understanding did not grant permission. To know was not to act. This distinction formed the core of their obedience. The heavenly order did not measure worth by proximity to power, but by faithfulness to assignment. The watchers were not lesser for their silence. Their restraint was considered strength. In a realm where will carries force, choosing not to act required greater discipline than action itself. Their authority, though real, was bounded. They could observe disorder but not correct it. They could perceive weakness but not intervene. Correction belonged to higher command. Instruction belonged to appointed messengers. Judgment belonged to the throne alone. The watchers were entrusted with awareness, not outcome. This limitation was not imposed in distrust. It was given in wisdom, for to rule requires distance, and to teach requires timing. The watchers were placed close enough to see, but far enough to remain unaffected. Their role preserved clarity. It ensured that creation unfolded according to design, not according to reaction. Obedience within the heavenly order was not enforced through threat. It was sustained through understanding. The watchers knew the cost of deviation, even before it occurred. They understood that crossing boundaries would not only alter the earth, but unravel the structure that held all realms in harmony. Yet obedience was not automatic. The gift of will extended even to those formed of light. The watchers were not bound as instruments but entrusted as stewards. Their freedom was real, and therefore their responsibility was heavy. To remain within their charge required constant alignment of desire with command. The concept of responsibility without possession defined their role. They cared for what they did not own. They guarded what they could not touch. This discipline preserved humility. It reminded them that proximity does not grant entitlement, and that awareness does not authorize control. Thus the Watchers stood as examples of ordered freedom. Their sacred charge was not to shape history, but to witness it faithfully. Their silence was not absence, but obedience held in stillness. And in this stillness, the balance of creation remained secure, so long as their charge was honored. Within the heavenly order, obedience was not measured by stillness alone, but by alignment of will. The Watchers were entrusted with awareness that reached beyond the surface of events. They perceived not only what occurred, but what moved beneath it. Intention, tendency, and consequence were visible to them in ways hidden from the earth below. This awareness carried weight. To see unfolding patterns without responding required mastery of self. The Watchers observed growth and decline, faithfulness and wandering, yet they were commanded to remain within restraint. Their task was not correction but record. What they beheld was carried upward, preserved within the order of heaven, not acted upon at their discretion. In this structure, watching differed entirely from ruling. To rule is to impose direction. To watch is to guard boundary. The Watchers were not given authority to shape outcomes. They were given responsibility to ensure separation remained intact. Their presence affirmed limits. Their silence reinforced design. The Book of Enoch speaks of their placement as deliberate and solemn. They were stationed where the nearness of creation could be. Seen clearly, yet where desire was meant to be disciplined. This placement tested obedience not through hardship, but through beauty. To behold without possessing, to admire without intervening, required strength greater than command. Responsibility without possession formed the core of their charge. They were entrusted with oversight, not ownership. What they watched did not belong to them. The earth was not their domain. Humanity was not their charge to instruct. Their duty was to remain faithful to what was not theirs. This principle preserved order throughout the heavenly host. Authority was distributed with clarity. Each role carried limitation. Even those closest to the throne were bound by command. Freedom existed within structure, not beyond it. To step outside assignment was not expansion, but fracture. The Watchers understood this truth. They were aware that action beyond command would alter not only their own standing, but the balance of all realms. The cost of disobedience would not be contained. It would echo through creation. This awareness deepened the gravity of their restraint. Yet awareness also intensified temptation. To see potential without being permitted to act placed strain upon the will. The Watchers observed humanity learning slowly, stumbling through simplicity, bound by limits they themselves did not share. Knowledge that was hidden from the earth was known to them. Wisdom restrained was still wisdom present. The heavenly order allowed this tension to exist. Obedience was not tested by ignorance, but by clarity. The Watchers were not shielded from temptation. They were trusted to remain faithful despite it. Their discipline was meant to grow stronger through continued restraint. This trust revealed the dignity of their role. They were not treated as instruments, but as beings capable of loyalty. The charge given to them assumed maturity. It assumed that knowing more did not require doing more. It assumed that restraint was chosen, not enforced. In this way, the Watchers embodied a unique form of authority. Their power lay not in action, but in faithfulness. Their influence was not visible, yet it was essential. As long as they remained within their charge, the boundary between realms held firm. Thus the sacred charge of the Watchers was both simple and profound. To watch, to remain, to uphold order through obedience, to guard separation through restraint, and to carry the weight of awareness without allowing it to become possession. This role did not diminish them. It honored them. For in a universe formed by command, the choice to obey sustained harmony, and so long as that choice endured, the design of creation remained intact. The freedom granted to the Watchers was not incidental. It was woven into the fabric of their creation. They were formed with will, capable of alignment and capable of turning. This freedom was not a flaw but a necessity. Obedience has meaning only where refusal is possible. Without choice, faithfulness becomes function and trust becomes irrelevant. The heavenly order accounted for this freedom. It did not eliminate desire but directed it. The Watchers were given purpose, structure, and clarity. Their charge was defined not to constrain them but to guide their will. Within these bounds, their freedom remained whole. Yet freedom carries weight. To choose obedience repeatedly requires vigilance. The Watchers were not bound by habit, but by decision renewed over time. Each moment of restraint affirmed their loyalty. Each act of watching without acting reinforced their alignment with command. The ancient texts suggest that this ongoing choice shaped their identity. They were known not by what they did, but by what they refused to do. Their silence became testimony. Their stillness became witness. In remaining within their charge, they upheld the order entrusted to them. This understanding prepares the ground for what would later unfold. Their failure, when it came, was not ignorance. It was not confusion. It was not imposed. It arose from decision. The weight of that decision rests in the clarity of the charge they were given. Only where instruction is clear can disobedience be fully measured. The Book of Enoch presents the Watchers as fully aware of consequence. They understood the boundaries they were to uphold. They knew the cost of crossing them. Their later actions cannot be softened by misunderstanding. They were deliberate. They were chosen. This truth does not diminish the gravity of their role. It heightens it. For their sacred charge was honored until it was broken. The trust placed in them was real. The discipline expected of them was understood. Their fall would not arise from chaos, but from deviation within order. In the stillness of their watching, desire had room to form. Not desire for power, but for proximity. Not hunger for dominion, but curiosity toward experience. This subtle shift marked the beginning of strain. Yet at this stage, it remained contained. The charge still held. The boundary remained intact. The chapter of their sacred charge closes not with action, but with tension held in balance. Obedience remained present. Freedom remained intact. The order of heaven continued unbroken. The Watchers stood at their post, aware of both their duty and their capacity to choose otherwise. This understanding is essential. It frames the events that would follow not as accident but as consequence. It reveals that what would later break began within clarity, not confusion. The sacred charge was sufficient. The design was sound. The responsibility was understood. Thus the Watchers remain, at this point in the telling, faithful in function, yet free in will. Their silence continues. Their watching endures. The boundary between heaven and earth still stands, and the weight of choice rests quietly within them, unseen but present. Here the account pauses, not because nothing moves, but because the moment before movement holds meaning. What was entrusted has been described. What was required has been made clear, and the gravity of responsibility given has been established, waiting for the choice that will alter all that follows. The turning did not begin with noise. It began with agreement. Long before action was taken upon the earth, a movement occurred among the Watchers themselves. It was not sudden, nor born of confusion. It formed slowly, shaped by shared awareness and unspoken consent. What had once been restraint began to feel like distance. What had once been obedience began to feel like withholding. The Book of Enoch speaks of a gathering, not commanded, not announced, a coming together of those who had long stood apart, now drawn by a common inclination. They descended to a mountain set apart, a high place that looked upon the earth without belonging to it. This mountain would later be known as Hermon. The mountain is not described as chosen for power but for witness. It stood between realms, neither fully lifted toward the heavens nor fully claimed by the plains below. Its stillness received their presence. Its height held their voices. What was spoken there was not carried away by wind but held. Upon this mountain the watchers did not act at once. They spoke, they considered, they named their desire, and in naming it together they gave it form. What had lived within thought was now shaped by agreement. The oath was not impulsive. It was measured. Each knew the charge given to them. Each understood the boundary they were about to cross. The gravity of their decision lay not in ignorance but in clarity. They did not mistake their role. They chose to move beyond it. In ancient understanding, an oath was not merely a promise. It was a binding of will. To swear was to set intention into permanence. Words spoken under oath were believed to shape reality because they aligned desire with decision. To take an oath together was to bind not only action but consequence. The watchers understood this. For this reason the oath was shared. None would stand apart. None would act alone. Each bound himself to the others so that fear would not turn them back once the boundary was crossed. In unity they sought strength. In shared resolve they quieted doubt. The Book of Enoch records that they swore together, invoking curses upon themselves should they fail to carry through what they had agreed. This was not devotion. It was finality. By sealing their decision with self-imposed consequence, they removed the path of retreat. The mountain bore this moment in silence. It did not judge. It did not respond. Yet it stood as witness to what was spoken upon it. In ancient thought, the land itself remembered. Stones held memory. Heights preserved testimony. Mount Hermon would carry the weight of this oath long after the voices that spoke it fell silent. This was the moment where watching ended. Until this gathering, desire had remained internal. Awareness had not yet become action. The oath marked the passage from intention to intervention. What had been contemplated was now committed. What had been restrained was now released. The rebellion did not erupt in defiance. It unfolded through agreement. Each watcher chose not only for himself but for the whole. In binding themselves together, they ensured that the fall would not be singular. It would be collective. This is how rebellion enters ordered worlds, not through chaos but through covenant misused, not through ignorance but through shared resolve against known command. The oath on Mount Hermon did not shatter the heavens in that moment. It bent them. No thunder marked the turning. No judgment fell at once. The earth below remained unchanged. Yet the boundary had been crossed in will, if not yet in deed. The veil still stood, but it had been approached with intention to pass through it. The mountain remained. The oath remained. And what was spoken there began its slow descent toward action, heavy with consequence, moving quietly toward the earth. In the ancient understanding, an oath was never separate from identity. To swear was to bind the inner will to an outer act. What was spoken before witness became part of the one who spoke. For beings formed of will and light, such binding carried great force. The watchers knew this. They did not speak lightly. Each word spoken upon the mountain carried intention forward. The oath did not compel them against their desire. It revealed their desire fully formed. What had once existed as inclination was now fixed as decision. Through shared speech, private longing became collective purpose. Agreement altered the weight of choice. Alone, doubt can still interrupt resolve. Together, doubt is absorbed by unity. The watchers bound themselves to one another so that hesitation would find no refuge. If one faltered, all would stand. If one feared consequence, all would share it. In this way, the oath did more than promise action. It removed the space for return. The spiritual significance of this act lay not only in what was chosen, but in how it was chosen. Rebellion did not arise through sudden rupture. It emerged through structure mirrored from Obed. Hence, the watchers used the language of covenant, a form meant for faithfulness, and turned it toward transgression. This inversion carried lasting weight. Covenant in ancient thought was meant to uphold order. It aligned will with command. When covenant is removed from rightful authority, it does not dissolve. It redirects. The oath taken on Mount Hermon carried power because the form itself remained intact, even as its purpose was altered. The mountain, silent and unmoving, received this inversion without response. It did not resist, yet it did not affirm. Its role was not to judge, but to remember. In the ancient world, places of decision became markers of consequence. They stood as enduring witnesses long after those who spoke there moved on. Mount Hermon thus became more than a location. It became a threshold. What was sworn there marked the crossing from restraint into intent. Though no visible action followed immediately, the act had already occurred within the will. From this moment forward, watching alone was no longer possible. The oath also revealed the weight of free will among celestial beings. The watchers were not compelled by force or deceived by ignorance. Their choice emerged from awareness. They knew the structure they were departing from. They understood the separation they were dissolving. The oath was taken with full knowledge of consequence. This knowledge did not stop them. It sharpened their resolve. By naming the cost openly, they accepted it in advance. The oath functioned as both declaration and surrender. What followed would no longer be guided by restraint, but by commitment to the chosen path. The shared nature of the oath ensured that responsibility could not be isolated. No single watcher could later claim innocence or coercion. Each stood equally bound. The collective nature of the vow transformed individual desire into unified action. This unity magnified consequence. Rebellion often seeks justification through isolation. This rebellion sought strength through agreement. In doing so, it ensured that its impact would be broad. What was chosen by many would shape many. The earth below, still unaware, would soon feel the weight of this decision. Yet even here the narrative remains quiet. No movement disturbs the mountain. No change appears upon the earth. The turning point passes unnoticed by those below. The heavens do not tremble. The oath rests in silence, complete and sealed. This silence is essential. It reveals how transgression begins long before its effects appear. The moment of greatest consequence often arrives without spectacle. The oath on Mount Hermon did not announce judgment. It prepared it. From this point onward, the watchers are no longer merely observers. Though they have not yet acted, their role has changed. The boundary has been crossed in intention. What remains is the unfolding of what has already been chosen. After the oath was sealed, there was no immediate movement. The watchers did not descend at once. They did not speak further. The moment had passed, yet its weight remained. Silence followed decision, as it often does. What was bound did not require repetition. This stillness was not uncertainty. It was finality. The choice had been made in fullness. The oath held them in its grasp, not as constraint but as confirmation. What had been spoken could not be withdrawn. In ancient understanding, an oath completed its work the moment it was uttered. The mountain continued to stand as witness. It did not tremble beneath the weight of what it bore. Yet in bearing it, the mountain became marked. In later ages, its name would carry echo of this moment, though its stones would remain unchanged. Such is the nature of witness. It endures without protest. The watchers returned from the mountain altered in alignment, though unchanged in form. Their station remained. Their appearance did not shift. Yet inwardly, restraint had given way to intention. They now stood within their charge while preparing to abandon it. The tension between assignment and desire had resolved into decision. This resolution did not bring peace. It brought momentum. Once will is fixed, action follows in time. The oath did not command immediate descent, but it ensured descent would come. What was delayed was not undone. The future had been shaped, even as the present remained unchanged. The sacred writings present this moment as the true beginning of transgression, not the acts that would follow, but the agreement that made them inevitable. The fall did not begin with union or teaching. It began with covenant broken by redirection. The form of obedience was retained, while its purpose was abandoned. In this way, the rebellion mirrored order while opposing it. Structure remained. Unity remained. Even reverence for oath remained. Yet the object of loyalty shifted. The watchers chose one another over command, agreement over assignment. This shift, subtle yet complete, marked the breach. The turning point is quiet because rebellion often seeks legitimacy. By clothing itself in solemnity, it avoids the appearance of defiance. The watchers did not cry out against heaven. They did not denounce their charge. They simply chose otherwise together. From this moment forward, the role of witness would be distorted. Watching would give way to involvement. Observation would become participation. The line that had held for ages would soon be crossed in deed, having already been crossed in will. Yet the narrative does not hurry. Time still moves. The earth still turns. Humanity remains unaware. The heavens remain ordered in appearance. Judgment does not fall at once. Space remains for unfolding. This measured pacing underscores the nature of consequence. Choice does not always announce its cost immediately. Effects may be delayed, but they are not diminished. What was sworn on Mount Hermon carried within it the weight of what would follow. Thus the chapter closes with quiet certainty. The oath stands complete. The watchers stand bound by their own words. The mountain stands bearing witness, and the world remains unchanged for now. But the balance that once held is no longer intact. The shift has occurred. The turning has been made. And from this point onward, the story moves not toward possibility, but toward fulfillment of what has already been chosen. The descent did not appear as conquest. It came as instruction. When the watchers crossed from observation into involvement, they did not arrive bearing weapons or commands. They arrived bearing knowledge. What had been restrained within the heavenly order was now released upon the earth, not according to timing, but according to desire. The Book of Enoch records these teachings with careful detail. Each form of knowledge is named, not to glorify it, but to reveal its weight. Metal was shown how to yield its hidden strength. The shaping of blades and tools was taught, not for cultivation alone, but for dominance. What the earth had concealed for balance was drawn out for control. This knowledge was not false. It was accurate. It was effective. Yet it was given without wisdom's companion, restraint. Tools meant for measured use became instruments of excess. What could have served preservation was turned toward harm. Advancement appeared swift, but stability was lost. Alongside metalwork came the knowledge of warfare. Strategy, formation, and the refinement of violence were no longer learned through necessity, but through instruction. Conflict, once limited by ignorance, became efficient. Bloodshed increased not because humanity became more cruel, but because it became more capable. Other teachings followed. The arts of enchantment were revealed. Words were taught to bend perception. Symbols were shown to influence will. These practices did not summon power from nothing. They redirected attention and desire. Humanity learned to shape outcomes through unseen means without understanding the cost of doing so. The signs of the heavens were also revealed. Movements of stars, patterns of seasons, and hidden cycles were explained. This knowledge carried potential for wisdom, yet it arrived without humility. Instead of fostering reverence, it fed control. The heavens became objects of use rather than wonder. The Book of Enoch presents these teachings not as isolated acts but as a system. Knowledge flowed in many directions at once. Humanity did not receive one lesson at a time. It was overwhelmed. What was meant to unfold slowly now arrived all at once, without preparation. The effect was not immediate collapse. It was imbalance. Desire shifted. Attention moved outward. Humanity began to seek mastery rather than alignment. The earth was no longer approached with patience but with extraction. Power was pursued for its own sake. This knowledge altered behavior quietly. There was no single moment of corruption. There was accumulation. As skill increased, restraint decreased. As capability grew, humility diminished. The earth began to feel this change. Resources were consumed faster than renewal allowed. Violence expanded beyond necessity. Yet the knowledge itself remained neutral. The sacred texts do not condemn learning. They reveal timing. What was given was not evil in substance, but dangerous in context. Wisdom without readiness becomes burden. Power without character becomes destruction. The Watchers did not force this knowledge upon humanity. It was offered. Humanity received it eagerly. The exchange was mutual, bound by curiosity and desire. Responsibility, therefore, does not rest in one realm alone. Corruption spread through participation. The change upon the earth was gradual. Systems shifted. Relationships altered. What once held balance now leaned toward excess. The sacred order that governed growth began to erode, not through invasion but through instruction unchecked. Thus forbidden knowledge entered the world quietly. It did not announce itself as forbidden. It presented itself as progress. And in doing so, it reshaped the earth not through sudden ruin, but through steady distortion, teaching humanity to wield power before learning how to bear it. As knowledge spread, its effects began to settle into the patterns of daily life. What had once been rare became common. What had once required patience now yielded to technique. Humanity learned not only how to make, but how to accelerate. Time itself seemed shortened, as effort was replaced by method. The teachings did not arrive as commands. They arrived as explanations. The Watchers showed how things worked, how forces could be shaped, how outcomes could be guided. This manner of instruction carried quiet authority. It appeared generous. It appeared illuminating. Yet it carried no instruction on restraint. Metal once used for simple tools became refined beyond necessity. Blades grew sharper. Implements grew heavier. The ability to dominate the land and one another expanded. With this expansion came a shift in desire. Strength became admired. Control became pursued. Power began to define worth. Warfare changed in its nature. Conflict was no longer a response to scarcity alone. It became organized. It became efficient. Knowledge taught how to wound with precision, how to overwhelm with strategy. Violence increased not in fury but in effectiveness. The Arth absorbed this change in silence. The arts of enchantment further altered human perception. Words were taught not merely for communication, but for influence. Signs and markings were used to focus intention. Humanity learned that unseen forces could be directed, that outcomes could be shaped without visible effort. This knowledge fostered a sense of mastery detached from responsibility. Celestial understanding also reshaped awareness. The heavens, once observed with reverence, were now studied for advantage. Patterns were tracked not to honor order but to predict and exploit. The stars became instruments rather than signs. Wonder gave way to calculation. These changes did not bring immediate despair. They brought confidence. Humanity felt expanded, capable. No longer limited by ignorance, people moved with certainty into domains once approached with caution. Yet this confidence masked imbalance. Desire began to outpace wisdom. Capacity grew faster than discernment. The earth responded to this shift. Extraction increased. Boundaries were pressed. What had once been taken with gratitude was now taken with expectation. The land was shaped according to will, not rhythm. Renewal was no longer awaited. It was demanded. The Book of Enoch presents this transformation without exaggeration. It does not speak of sudden ruin, but of gradual distortion. Systems formed around power rather than care. Knowledge clustered in the hands of those who sought advantage. Inequality deepened. Violence normalized. Instruction, not invasion, carried this change. Humanity was not overthrown. It was educated beyond its readiness. This distinction matters. Corruption did not arrive as an enemy. It arrived as opportunity. The teachings did not destroy by force. They altered direction. Throughout this process, knowledge itself remained unchanged. Metal still held strength. Words still carried meaning. Stars still moved according to order. The danger lay not in what was known, but in how it was held. Wisdom requires timing. Without it, understanding becomes weight. The Watchers did not withdraw these teachings once given. Knowledge, once released, does not return to silence. Humanity continued to build upon what it had learned, extending imbalance further. Each generation inherited capability without context. Memory of restraint faded. Responsibility spread thin. No single act could be blamed. No single teacher could be undone. The corruption became systemic, woven into practice and expectation. The earth bore the cost, quietly and steadily. Thus forbidden knowledge reshaped the world without spectacle. It did not burn cities in a day. It changed values over time. It taught humanity to reach further than its character could sustain. And in doing so, it prepared the ground for consequences not yet visible, but already certain. As generations passed, the weight of what had been taught settled deeper into the fabric of the world. Knowledge no longer appeared foreign. It became assumed. What was once received with awe was now handled without reflection. The extraordinary became ordinary, and with this shift, caution diminished. Human desire adjusted to its expanded reach. Ambition widened. Possibility invited excess. The earth was no longer approached as something to dwell within, but as something to be shaped at will. Boundaries that had once guided interaction faded from memory. The rhythm of creation was pressed to accommodate human intention. This transformation did not erase reverence entirely. It redirected it. Power became the object of trust. Skill replaced patience. Technique replaced humility. Humanity learned to rely on what could be controlled rather than what was given. The unseen order that once framed life receded behind visible results. The Book of Enoch lists the teachings not to catalog achievement, but to reveal imbalance. Each form of knowledge carried consequence when detached from restraint. Warfare increased because efficiency made violence easier. Enchantment spread because influence promised advantage without effort. Celestial understanding was misused because it suggested mastery over time itself. These practices reinforced one another. Power gained through metalwork demanded protection through warfare. Influence gained through enchantment demanded certainty through signs. The system grew inwardly consistent, yet outwardly destructive. What began as knowledge became dependence. The earth continued to change under this pressure. Life was consumed faster than it could renew. Violence spread beyond necessity into dominance. The harmony that once guided growth fractured into competition. Yet this fracture did not appear as disaster. It appeared as progress. This is the subtle nature of corruption described in the ancient texts. It does not announce itself as ruin. It offers improvement. It promises expansion. Only later does its cost become visible. By the time imbalance is recognized, it has already become struck. Throughout this unfolding, knowledge remained neutral. The sacred writings do not condemn understanding itself. They reveal that knowledge carries direction according to the intention of those who wield it. When given without wisdom, it accelerates what already exists within the heart. The watcher's role in this exchange cannot be separated from human response. Teaching was offered, but it was also received. Humanity did not resist. It embraced what increased capability. Responsibility therefore moved in both directions. The distortion of the world was shared. The chapter closes not with collapse but with momentum. The earth now moved under altered principles. What had once been guided by restraint was driven by desire. The change was complete enough to endure, yet subtle enough to continue unnoticed. No judgment is spoken here. No sentence is declared. This chapter records condition, not consequence. It reveals the soil from which later events will grow. The imbalance established through forbidden knowledge prepared the world for what would follow, though it did not yet reveal it. Thus the giving of forbidden knowledge stands as a quiet turning of the age. It did not end the world. It reshaped it. It taught humanity to hold power without understanding its weight. And in doing so, it set the earth upon a path that could not sustain itself, though it still appeared strong. Here the teaching ends, but its effects continue. The world carries what it has learned. The cost has not yet been paid, but the balance that once held has been altered, not by invasion or destruction, but by instruction received too soon and held without restraint. The chapter rests in this awareness, calm and unadorned, leaving the unfolding consequences to arrive in their appointed time. From the union that crossed appointed boundaries, life arose that did not fit within the order that had shaped the world. The ancient writings speak of these beings without haste and without wonder. They are named not to glorify them, but to explain the weight of their presence. They were called Nephilim. Their form was marked by scale, but their true distortion lay deeper than size. They carried appetite without measure, desire without restraint. What they consumed was not limited to food or land, but extended into dominance itself. They did not simply live upon the earth. They exhausted it. Genesis speaks briefly of them, yet with enough weight to signal consequence. The Book of Enoch expands the account, not to add spectacle, but to reveal progression. These beings grew rapidly. What they required exceeded what the earth could offer in balance. When provision failed, violence followed. The increase of violence was not sudden. It spread as capability spread. The Nephilim were strong, but strength alone did not corrupt the world. It was the absence of limit. What they desired, they took. What they could not obtain, they destroyed. Hunger turned outward, and nothing remained untouched by its reach. The land itself began to bear the cost. Fields were stripped. Creatures were consumed beyond need. The rhythms that had governed life were disrupted. The earth, once patient and generous, could not restore what was taken without pause. Scarcity grew where abundance had been. The ancient texts speak of the earth as bearing witness, not as a living voice, but as a record of imbalance. Soil hardened. Waters became troubled. The natural order, once aligned, began to fracture under pressure it was not formed to sustain. The Nephilim did not act alone. Their presence reshaped those around them. Humanity learned from what it feared and envied. Violence became language. Power became measure. Corruption did not remain contained within those of great size. It spread through imitation and adaptation. This spread is central to the account. The giants are not presented as isolated monsters. They are symbols of excess made visible. Through them, unchecked desire took form. Through them, the cost of broken boundaries became clear. The Watchers' earlier teachings now bore fruit of a different kind. Knowledge without restraint had prepared the ground. The Nephilim accelerated what had already begun. What was once imbalance became devastation. What was once distortion became collapse. The Book of Enoch describes their end not yet, but it describes their impact fully. The earth cried out not in words but in condition. Its ability to sustain life diminished. Its harmony dissolved. The cry was not emotional. It was factual. Creation no longer functioned as intended. Yet the tone of the record remains measured. There is no rush to judgment. No alarm is raised in the telling. The narrative allows the weight of consequence to speak for itself. The giants did not need to be condemned loudly. Their presence was condemnation enough. This chapter of the world's history is not told to inspire fear. It is told to reveal inevitability. When boundaries are crossed, effects follow. When desire exceeds restraint, destruction spreads beyond its source. The Nephilim did not invent corruption. They embodied it. The earth endured this age in silence. It absorbed the weight until it could no longer restore balance on its own. The cry of the earth was not rebellion. It was testimony. It declared that the order once given had been broken, and that what lived upon it now exceeded what it could bear. The world had changed, not through spectacle but through accumulation. The giants walked upon the land, but their greater mark was left within it. And the cry that rose from the earth did not call for haste. It called for response, measured and certain, waiting beyond the horizon of this age. As the Nephilim increased upon the land, their presence reshaped every layer of existence. What had begun as distortion within a single union now expanded into a condition that touched all creation. Excess did not remain confined to those of great stature. It spread outward, altering human behavior, animal life, and the land itself. The ancient writings describe how the giants consumed without pause. What the earth produced was not enough to satisfy them. When harvests failed to meet their hunger, they turned against the herds. When the herds diminished, they turned against humanity itself. Appetite, once unchecked, does not correct itself. It demands more, even when nothing remains to give. Violence followed this progression naturally. It was not always born of anger, but of scarcity created by excess. The Nephilim took what was needed to sustain their scale, and in doing so, removed what others required to live. Survival became competition. Competition became conflict. Conflict hardened into routine. Humanity adapted to this altered world. Some resisted, but many flee. Arned to imitate. Strength was admired. Dominance was copied. The presence of the giants normalized imbalance. What was once unthinkable became acceptable. The corruption that entered through forbidden union now spread through behavior. The natural order responded accordingly. The land no longer produced with the same abundance. Renewal slowed. Cycles once reliable became strained. The earth did not rebel. It responded. When pressed beyond design, it yielded less. This response was not punishment but consequence. The Book of Enoch speaks of the earth crying out. This cry is not described as sound, but as witness. Creation bore testimony to its condition. The imbalance left record in soil and sea, in famine and fear. The cry reached beyond the earth itself, rising as evidence before the order that had once held it in harmony. This cry did not demand spectacle. It did not call for immediate destruction. It revealed truth. The earth declared that it could no longer sustain what walked upon it. The scale of life had exceeded the structure designed to support it. The giants in this telling are not portrayed as singular evils. They are symptoms made visible. They represent desire given form without boundary. Through them, corruption became tangible. Their size magnified the consequences of earlier choices, making imbalance impossible to ignore. The Watchers' transgression thus bore fruit far beyond intention. What may have appeared as limited involvement produced widespread collapse. Corruption does not remain isolated. It multiplies through systems and behaviors, affecting those who never chose it directly. This spread reveals the true weight of broken boundaries. When order is disturbed at its source, all connected structures are affected. The giants did not merely disrupt humanity. They strained creation itself. The earth, once patient, now stood as witness to its own depletion. Still, the narrative remains calm. There is no urgency in its tone. The unfolding is steady. The account allows consequence to speak without amplification. The inevitability of response grows clearer, not through alarm but through accumulation. This chapter prepares the ground for what must follow, not by announcing judgment but by establishing necessity. The world had reached a condition that could not correct itself. The cry of the earth was not accusation, it was evidence. Thus the age of the giants stands as a threshold. Beyond it, restoration could not occur without intervention. The imbalance had become systemic. The earth had testified. What remained was response, measured and complete, awaiting its appointed time. The presence of the Nephilim did not end with hunger and violence alone. Their existence altered the meaning of life upon the earth. What had once been shaped by measure was now driven by survival beneath excess. The rhythm of creation slowed, strained beneath weight it was never formed to bear. In this altered world, trust diminished. Fear spread quietly. Humanity learned to live beneath threat, adapting not toward wisdom but toward endurance. The strong endured by dominance. The weak endured by concealment. Balance, once shared, fragmented into unequal survival. The giants became symbols beyond their actions. They represented what occurs when boundaries dissolve and desire expands unchecked. Their scale made visible the distortion already present within systems of knowledge and power. Through them, the cost of earlier decisions could no longer be hidden. The ancient texts do not dwell on their individual deeds. Names are rarely given. Stories are not extended. This restraint is intentional. The giants are not meant to be remembered as figures of legend, but as markers of consequence. Their significance lies in what they reveal, not in what they perform. The earth continued to bear witness. Its cry deepened as imbalance spread. Water sources failed. Soil hardened. Life diminished in places where abundance had once been assumed. These changes did not arrive suddenly. They accumulated until restoration was no longer possible through natural means. The cry of the earth reached beyond itself. In the sacred tradition, creation is not isolated. What occurs within it is known beyond it. The testimony of the land rose as evidence within the greater order, declaring that the harmony entrusted to it had been broken. This testimony was not emotional. It did not plead. It stated condition. The earth revealed that it could no longer sustain life as it was now shaped. The scale of corruption had surpassed its capacity to heal. The calm cadence of the narrative reinforces this truth. There is no haste in response. Judgment does not rush forward. The record allows space for understanding. Consequence follows condition, not impatience. The giants, though central to this chapter, do not remain its focus. Attention shifts outward toward the systems they affected and the imbalance they exposed. Corruption spread through all layers of creation, not because all chose it, but because all were connected to it. This interconnectedness reveals the weight of transgression. No act remains isolated. No boundary crossed remains contained. What begins in one realm shapes another. The earth bore the cost of choices made beyond it. As this age draws to its close, the narrative rests in inevitability. The world has reached a state that cannot endure. The cry of the earth stands complete. Testimony has been given. Balance has been lost. Yet even here, the telling remains without fear. There is no despair in the record. The acknowledgement of condition is itself a step toward response. Recognition precedes correction. Witness precedes restoration. Thus the chapter ends in stillness, not silence. The earth has spoken through its condition. The giants have revealed the weight of excess. The corruption has spread beyond its source. What follows will not arise from anger, but from necessity. The cry of the earth has been heard. The order once broken now awaits a response measured in scale to what has been revealed. When the measure of imbalance was complete, the response did not rise from the earth. It descended from above. The visions recorded in the Book of Enoch speak of a court established long before the cry of creation was heard. This court did not convene in haste. It was not assembled in reaction. It stood ready, ordered, and enduring, awaiting the moment when truth would be fully revealed. Thrones appeared, not as symbols of power seized, but as seats of authority appointed. Fire flowed before them, not as destruction, but as clarity. In ancient understanding, fire reveals what cannot remain hidden. It separates substance from excess. It restores distinction where confusion has grown. The presence of the Most High is described without form, yet with weight. The court is not filled with voices competing for judgment. Silence governs the assembly. All that is required is already known. The record is complete. The testimony of the earth stands confirmed. Judgment is pronounced not as accusation but as declaration. What has occurred is named. Boundaries have been crossed. Knowledge has been given out of order. Life has been distorted. Creation has suffered. The truth is spoken plainly without ornament. The watchers are addressed not as strangers but as those entrusted and found unfaithful. Their charge is recalled. Their freedom is acknowledged. Their choice is named. There is no confusion between mistake and rebellion. The clarity of their decision establishes the clarity of their sentence. Justice in this telling is not driven by anger. It is driven by restoration. Order cannot return while corruption remains unaddressed. Correction must occur for harmony to be reestablished. Judgment, therefore, is the necessary movement of balance toward repair. The sentence pronounced upon the watchers is separation. They are to be bound, not destroyed. Their influence is to be restrained. The realms they crossed are to be divided again. This binding is not revenge. It is containment. It prevents further distortion while preserving the structure of justice. The Book of Enoch describes this binding with restraint. The watchers are confined to appointed places, removed from the earth they altered. Their ability to teach, to interfere, to extend corruption is ended. What was released cannot be undone, but it can be halted. Within the court, intermediary angels are named. Michael stands as one who executes decree with faithfulness. Raphael is sent to heal what has been wounded. Each role is defined. Judgment is not carried out by chaos, but by order responding to disorder. These angels do not act independently. They carry instruction. Their authority is derived, not assumed. Through them, justice moves into action without losing alignment. What is pronounced above is carried out below with precision. The tone of the court remains still. There is no celebration. There is no lament. Judgment is not spectacle. It is necessity fulfilled. The record does not linger on emotion because the purpose is restoration, not display. In this moment, divine order is reasserted. The clarity of truth leads directly to sentence. What has been revealed cannot be ignored. What has been named must be addressed. The court moves as it always has, in alignment with truth rather than reaction. This is the beginning of correction, not yet its completion, but its certainty. The judgment pronounced sets the course for what must follow, ensuring that the disorder introduced does not define the final state of creation. The judgment spoken in the heavenly court did not echo outward as destruction. It moved with precision. Each decree carried purpose measured to the transgression it addressed. Nothing was excessive. Nothing was withheld. Justice unfolded according to truth already established. The binding of the watchers is described in the visions of Enoch with solemn detail. They are not cast into disorder but confined within order. Places are appointed for their restraint, set apart from the realms they disturbed. Separation restores boundary. Distance restores balance. What crossed without permission is now held without movement. This binding is final in its intent, yet calm in its execution. The watchers are not erased from existence. Their awareness remains. Their memory remains. But their ability to influence the world is removed. In this restraint, justice corrects without annihilating. The sentence matches the offense. The heavenly court recognizes that corruption did not arise from ignorance. It arose from choice. Therefore, correction does not seek to undo will, but to limit its reach. Freedom misused is not removed from the universe, but restricted from harming it further. Intermediary angels carry out this work with clarity. Michael is sent to bind those who abandon their charge. His role is not vengeance, but enforcement of decree. He acts as guardian of order, ensuring that the sentence spoken is fulfilled without deviation. Raphael is G. Ivan a different task. He is sent toward healing. The wounds left upon the earth require attention. What has been distorted must be addressed carefully. Healing follows judgment, not instead of it. Restoration requires first that corruption be restrained. These roles reveal the nature of divine justice. It is not singular in expression. It addresses multiple needs at once. Binding prevents further harm. Healing begins repair. Each movement is necessary. Neither replaces the other. The court does not act impulsively. Time is accounted for. The sequence of response honors the structure of creation. The watchers are restrained before the earth is restored. Order is reestablished above before balance is renewed below. This sequence preserves coherence. Throughout this process, silence remains present. There is no debate, no defense is offered. Truth has already been revealed. Judgment follows clarity. When condition is known fully, sentence becomes inevitable. Fire continues to flow before the throne, not consuming but illuminating. Nothing remains hidden. The record of events stands complete. The earth's cry has been heard and acknowledged. The response is measured, not delayed. The heavenly court does not respond to suffering with panic. It responds with structure. This is its nature. Justice does not mirror chaos. It corrects it by contrast. Where disorder spread gradually, correction unfolds deliberately. The restraint of the watchers also serves as warning. The order of heaven is not flexible in its boundaries. Freedom exists within assignment. When assignment is abandoned, consequence follows. This truth is not spoken in threat, but demonstrated in action. The narrative emphasizes that judgment is not arbitrary. It arises from alignment with reality. What was broken cannot remain so without affecting all else. Correction restores possibility. Without it, decay would continue unchecked. Thus the court completes its decree. What was spoken is now in motion. The watchers are bound. Their influence is ended. Healing begins its slow work. The heavens stand ordered once more. This moment does not conclude the story. It secures its direction. Judgment has been pronounced not to end creation but to preserve it. The order that once held is being reasserted, steady and unhurried, preparing the way for what must follow. With the decree fulfilled, the heavenly court does not dissolve. It remains as it has always remained, steady and complete. Judgment does not exhaust authority. It confirms it. Order does not need to be reassembled. It endures. The binding of the watchers stands as completed action. The separation between realms is restored. What had been crossed through desire is now secured through decree. The influence that once moved freely among humanity is no longer present. The source of corruption has been contained. Yet the court does not declare restoration complete. The earth still bears the weight of what has occurred. Judgment restrains further distortion, but it does not erase consequence. The structure of justice recognizes this. Correction unfolds in stages, each suited to its purpose. The role of healing continues. Raphael's task is ongoing, not immediate. What has been damaged cannot be mended in haste. Restoration respects time. It honors the rhythms that were broken by acceleration. Healing moves at the pace of balance, not urgency. The presence of Michael remains implied. Enforcement does not require constant display. Order, once restored, maintains itself through structure. The boundary now stands firm. The watchers remain bound. The distinction between realms is once again clear. The narrative emphasizes that judgment follows clarity. Nothing was spoken until all was revealed. Nothing was enacted until truth stood complete. This sequence affirms the nature of divine justice. It is not reactive. It is responsive to reality. The heavenly court does not announce triumph. There is no satisfaction in restraint imposed. Judgment is necessity, not pleasure. The stillness that follows is not emptiness. It is stability regained. This stillness allows reflection. The record of what occurred remains preserved. Memory is not erased. It serves as witness for future order. The consequences that follow will not arise from ignorance. They will arise from what has been revealed. The chapter rests here within this reasserted order. The heavens are aligned. The sentence has been carried out. The authority of the throne stands unchallenged. What remains is the unfolding of consequence upon the earth, not as punishment from anger, but as outcome shaped by condition. Judgment has set the limits. Within those limits, creation must now move toward restoration. The calm cadence of the narrative reinforces trust. Order has not been lost. It has been corrected. The court has acted. The truth has been honored. The sentence has been fulfilled. Thus the chapter closes in quiet certainty. Divine justice has been spoken and enacted. The heavens remain ordered. The path forward is set, not by chaos or fear, but by clarity and restoration held within the enduring structure of the Most High. After judgment was pronounced above, the earth was not struck at once. Space remained between decree and consequence. Within that space, a witness was sent. The Book of Enoch presents Enoch not as one who sought a voice, but as one who was taken into it. His role did not arise from ambition. It arose from obedience. He walked within his generation quietly, yet his path was set apart. What he received was not for elevation, but for transmission. Enoch's visions are described as journeys rather than revelations alone. He was shown what stood beyond the surface of the world. He was led through realms not to master them, but to bear witness to their order. Thrones, rivers of fire, and chambers of judgment were revealed, not to overwhelm, but to instruct. What Enoch saw was not separated from what he was sent to speak. The visions carried purpose. They formed the substance of warning. He was shown the judgment of the watchers, their binding, and the certainty of consequence. These were not distant events. They were realities already set in motion. When Enoch returned, his task was not to persuade through fear. He spoke what had been shown, plainly and without embellishment. The warnings were not framed as threat, but as truth. The condition of the world was named. The direction it was moving toward was revealed. Humanity received these warnings unevenly. Some listened with concern. Some dismissed them. Many continued unchanged. The Book of Enoch does not present this response with surprise. Rejection is not portrayed as failure of message, but as condition of the heart. Enoch's obedience is central to this chapter. He did not measure success by outcome. He measured faithfulness by alignment with what he was given. His warnings were acts of service, not attempts at reform. He carried testimony, not control. The tension between revelation and rejection unfolds quietly. There is no confrontation recorded, no great turning of nations. The world continues as it was, even as truth is spoken within it. This continuity underscores patience. Judgment does not rush to fulfill itself. The ancient texts acknowledge that repentance occurred, but it was limited. Change did not spread widely. The imbalance already woven into the world resisted reversal. Yet the presence of warning ensured that consequence would not arrive without witness. This space between decree and flood is significant. It reveals the nature of divine patience. Judgment had been determined, yet time was given. Response was permitted. The earth was not silenced before testimony was spoken. Enoch stands within this space as bridge. He connects the heavenly court to the earthly condition. What was declared above was made known below. The world was not left unaware. The calm cadence of this period remains intact. Days continue. Life persists. The warning does not interrupt existence. It accompanies it. This coexistence reveals that judgment is not impulsive. It unfolds with clarity and restraint. Thus the chapter begins with obedience embodied in witness. Enoch walks, speaks, and records. His role is not dramatic. It is faithful. He does not halt the world's direction, but he illuminates it. Within this illumination, responsibility is shared. Truth has been given. Response remains possible. The patience of judgment holds the world in balance a little longer, awaiting what will be chosen within the space that remains. The warnings carried by Enoch did not arrive as a single proclamation. They unfolded over time, shaped by vision and record. What he received was written and preserved, not for immediate effect alone, but for testimony that would endure beyond his generation. The act of recording itself was obedience. It ensured that what was revealed would not vanish with the moment. Enoch's journeys through the unseen realms deepened the weight of his message. He was shown the structure of judgment already set in place, not as threat, but as certainty. These visions did not stir urgency in his tone. They established inevitability. What was aligned with order would remain. What had deviated would be addressed. When Enoch spoke among humanity, he did not isolate himself as judge. He spoke as witness. His warnings did not elevate him above those who heard. They placed him among them, bearing knowledge they had not sought, yet needed to hear. This posture preserved humility within revelation. The response remained divided. Some acknowledged the truth of what was spoken, yet lacked strength to change course. Others dismissed the warnings as distant or irrelevant. Life continued to demand attention. Desire continued to guide behavior. The weight of corruption already present dulled the impact of warning. This resistance did not provoke immediate response from above. The space for repentance remained open, though narrow. The Book of Enoch does not portray this period as hopeful in scale, but it does not present it as empty. Even limited repentance carries meaning. The Ascents of judgment accounts for even small response. The tension between revelation and rejection becomes clearer in this quiet persistence. Truth does not force transformation. It offers alignment. When alignment is refused, truth remains unchanged. The warning does not fail because it is ignored. Its purpose is fulfilled by being spoken. The world, however, continues to move along its established path. Systems of excess and violence remain intact. The giants still dominate. The earth still groans beneath imbalance. The presence of warning does not reverse condition. It clarifies it. This clarification is essential. Judgment, when it arrives, will not arrive without explanation. The warnings ensure that consequence is understood not as sudden destruction, but as response to sustained condition. Humanity is not taken unaware. The record stands. Enoch's role within this process remains steady. He does not escalate his message. He does not alter its content to compel response. Faithfulness does not adapt truth to outcome. It preserves what was given. The patience shown during this period reflects divine restraint. Judgment is not delayed by uncertainty. It is delayed by mercy. Space is given for response even when outcome appears fixed. This space honors freedom, even when freedom has been misused. The bridge between decree and consequence grows more defined. What was pronounced in the heavenly court is now known on the earth. Awareness has been granted. Responsibility has been shared. Yet the calm continuity remains. The narrative does not hurry toward flood. It allows time to pass, warning to be spoken, and response to be revealed. This pacing reinforces trust in order. Nothing occurs without reason. Nothing unfolds without witness. Thus the warnings before the flood stand as testimony of patience. They confirm that judgment does not arise from silence, but from clarity given and refused. The world continues, not because it is restored, but because time has been granted. Within this granted time, Enoch completes his role. He speaks. He records. He walks faithfully. The outcome remains beyond his control, but the witness is complete. As time continued, the space given for response reached its fullness. The warnings had been spoken. The record had been preserved. What remained was not uncertainty, but condition revealed over duration. The patience shown was not indefinite. It was measured. Enoch's role did not conclude with repetition of warning. His witness was completed through faithfulness sustained over time. The ancient texts describe his departure not as death, but as removal. He was taken from among humanity, set apart from the unfolding consequence. This removal was not escape. It was completion of assignment. The absence of Enoch marked a transition. The voice of warning grew quiet, not because truth had changed, but because it had been fully given. The world now stood with knowledge of its condition and the direction it had chosen. The limited reach of repentance becomes evident in this stillness. Change did not spread widely enough to alter the course already set. The systems of imbalance remained intact. Violence continued. Excess persisted. The earth's condition did not improve. Yet the narrative does not present this as despair. The acknowledgement of limited repentance is offered without accusation. It simply reveals reality. The purpose of warning was not to guarantee reversal, but to ensure understanding. The patience of judgment is fully displayed here. Time was allowed for response. Witness was given. Clarity was offered. Judgment does not move forward until these elements are complete. This sequence affirms justice as measured and fair. The bridge between heavenly decree and earthly consequence is now fully formed. What was pronounced above has been made known below. The earth stands informed. Humanity stands accountable. The calm cadence of the narrative remains unbroken. There is no rush into destruction. The flood has not yet come. The world still breathes. This pause is not emptiness. It is the final stillness before response. Within this stillness, the structure of order remains visible. Judgment does not contradict patience. It completes it. Mercy does not cancel consequence. It prepares the ground for it to be understood. Enoch's departure reinforces this truth. His witness is preserved beyond his presence. The warnings remain in record. The testimony stands. What follows will not arise without context. Thus the chapter closes with quiet certainty. The time for warning has been honored. The space for response has been given. The patience of judgment has been fully displayed. What remains is not suspense, but inevitability. The world has revealed its condition. The decree has been spoken. The witness has been given. The bridge between heaven and earth now stands complete, awaiting the consequence that will move not in haste, but in fulfillment of what has already been made clear. When the appointed time arrived, it did not arrive as surprise. It came as fulfillment. The ancient record does not speak of the waters with urgency. They are not introduced as instruments of rage, but as agents of completion. What had been declared above and witnessed below now moved into form. The flood was not interruption. It was response. Genesis speaks simply of the opening of fountains and the release of rain. The Book of Enoch echoes this movement with quiet agreement. The waters rose not to conquer the earth, but to cover it. What had been distorted was not argued with. It was gathered beneath the surface and held. The earth did not resist the waters. It received them. Soil that had borne violence was submerged. Ground that had been stripped was wrested. The movement of water restored boundary by removing what had exceeded measure. Covering replaced chaos. Depth replaced excess. The giants did not endure this transition. Their presence, which had strained the world beyond its design, was brought to an end. Not through prolonged struggle, but through removal. The age shaped by unchecked appetite closed without ceremony. What could not remain within order was no longer present. The binding of the watchers reached its finality during this time. Their influence, already restrained, was now fully severed from the earth. The separation between realms was complete. What had crossed and corrupted could no longer return. The boundary stood firm once more. The flood did not preserve fragments of the former age. It did not negotiate with imbalance. It did not select pieces to remain. It covered completely, ensuring that what followed would not be shaped by what had been before. This completeness was essential. Partial cleansing would not restore order. As the waters rose, sound diminished. The noise of violence faded. The constant movement of excess slowed and ceased. The earth entered a state of suspension, held beneath the covering. In this suspension, restoration began quietly. Silence followed where chaos had reigned. This silence was not emptiness. It was rest. The earth, long strained, was given stillness. The waters bore witness not only to judgment completed, but to patience fulfilled. The narrative does not linger on loss. It moves toward closure. The flood marks the end of an age whose condition could not be corrected by instruction alone. What warning could not change, cleansing completed. This completion was not cruel. It was necessary. The order of creation required reset. The waters accomplished this without haste and without excess. They did exactly what was required and no more. As days passed and the waters held the earth, the world beneath them was quiet. No giants walked. No watchers taught. No systems of corruption pressed forward. What remained was potential, waiting beneath the surface. This stillness prepares the listener for transition. The age of distortion had closed. The earth rested within the waters. And in this resting, the possibility of renewal was preserved, not yet revealed but secured. The waters remained upon the earth for a time measured, not rushed. They did not recede quickly, nor did they linger without purpose. Their presence held the world in pause, suspending all former motion. What had once been driven by appetite and noise was now held beneath stillness. In this suspended state, the earth was neither producing nor consuming. It rested. The cycles that had been strained by excess were quieted. Growth was halted so that balance could be restored. The ancient texts speak of this pause not as absence of life, but as protection of what would come next. Beneath the covering, the remnants of the former age were sealed away. The systems shaped by corruption could not re-emerge. The memory of their dominance faded with their removal. The flood did not argue with the past. It ended it. The silence that followed was complete. Where cries had risen, there was no sound. Where violence had been constant, there was stillness. This silence was not fearful. It was gentle. It marked the closing of a chapter that could not be carried forward. The Book of Enoch reflects this silence as confirmation. What had been judged was now contained. The sentence spoken in the heavenly court had reached its fulfillment upon the earth. Nothing further was required. The waters held their place until the work was done. This period of stillness allowed separation to remain intact. Heaven did not descend. Earth did not rise. The boundary restored by judgment remained untested. The realms stood apart once more, not in distance but in clarity. Time moved differently within this silence. Days passed without event. The earth was not asked to produce. Humanity was not asked to respond. The pause itself was the response. In this waiting, the weight of what had occurred settled into finality. The narrative emphasizes this gentleness. There is no recounting of struggle, no dwelling on destruction. The focus remains on transition. An age had ended. Another was not yet begun. Between them lay rest. This rest was essential. Renewal does not follow immediately after correction. Space is required. The earth needed time to release what it had borne. The waters provided this release by holding all things in suspension. As the silence endured, the world was prepared for re-emergence. The ground beneath the waters was reshaped quietly. What would rise later would not carry the structures of the past. The covering ensured this separation. The flood, therefore, stands not as a moment of chaos, but as an interval of order restored. The waters obeyed their command. They rose, they held, and in time they would withdraw. Their obedience mirrored the order re-established above. This obedience is central to the calm of the account. Even judgment moves within structure. Even cleansing respects measure. Nothing exceeds its purpose. The silence following the flood did not erase memory. It settled it. The world was allowed to be still long enough for the weight of consequence to be complete. What followed would not be burdened by unresolved imbalance. Thus the waters remained and the silence endured. The earth rested beneath the covering. The former age was sealed. The next had not yet begun. In this quiet interval, creation waited, not in fear but in alignment. The work of ending had been accomplished. The work of beginning awaited its appointed time. When the waters began to withdraw, they did so without disturbance. Their retreat was as measured as their advance. The earth did not surge upward. It emerged slowly, released from covering into quiet readiness. What rose was not the same world that had been submerged. It had been emptied of what could not endure. The giants were gone. The systems that supported excess were gone. The voices that had driven corruption were silent. The earth stood cleansed not by force, but by completion. What had been sealed beneath the waters did not return. This withdrawal marked transition. The former age had closed fully. The silence that followed was not absence, but renewal beginning in stillness. The ground awaited new instruction. Life would return, but it would do so within restored boundary. The Book of Enoch reflects this moment as confirmation of separation. The watchers remained bound. Their influence did not rise with the waters. The division between realms held firm. What had been corrected did not require repetition. The earth, now visible again, carried memory but not burden. The weight of imbalance had been released. The silence that remained allowed order to reestablish itself without pressure. Growth would resume in time, but not yet. This chapter does not linger on what was lost. It rests in what was secured. The ending of one age is not treated as tragedy, but as necessity fulfilled. Closure is given space to be complete. Silence continues to shape the tone. The world does not rush forward, it waits. This waiting honors the work that has been done. Restoration does not hurry, it unfolds at the pace of design. The waters have accomplished their purpose. They have covered, held, and released. Their obedience stands as testimony to order restored. The earth remains quiet, ready to receive what will come next. This stillness prepares for continuation, not repetition. What follows will not mirror what was before. The silence guards against return to excess. It preserves the boundary re-established through judgment. Thus the chapter ends in calm finality. The flood has passed. The earth has rested. The silence remains not as emptiness but as peace. An age has ended. Another waits. Between them lies stillness, sufficient and complete, allowing rest where once there was strain. After the waters withdrew and the earth entered its renewed stillness, memory did not vanish. What had been revealed before the flood did not dissolve with the former age. It remained, carried forward not through proclamation, but through careful preservation. The writings attributed to Enoch did not move openly among all peoples. They passed quietly, guarded by those who understood their weight. The ancient tradition does not describe this preservation as secrecy born of fear, but as restraint shaped by discernment. What had been revealed was not meant for constant circulation. It was meant to endure without disturbance. The Book of Enoch survived through hands that did not seek authority from it. Communities received the text not as instruction for daily life, but as witness to what had been shown. It was read, copied, and protected, not expanded or embellished. The form remained stable. The tone remained solemn. This preservation was intentional. The knowledge contained within the book carried great scope. It spoke of heavenly order, judgment, and the crossing of boundaries. Such material required maturity to receive. Without care, it could be misused, misunderstood, or turned toward speculation rather than reverence. As generations passed, the text remained known, yet distant. It was remembered, not erased. Its presence influenced understanding without dominating it. The silence surrounding it was not neglect. It was guardianship. When later canons were formed, the exclusion of the Book of Enoch did not arise from denial of its existence. It arose from caution. The complexity of its visions, the density of its symbolism, and the risk of distortion shaped the decision. The concern was not truthfulness alone, but suitability. Theological caution guided this restraint. The text spoke of realms and judgments that could distract from the central rhythms of faith if approached without grounding. It revealed mysteries that were not necessary for communal order. Preservation without elevation allowed balance. Thus the book was set aside, not cast away. It remained accessible to those who sought understanding with humility, yet it did not shape doctrine openly. This position protected both the text and the communities that held it. The narrative of preservation reflects a deeper principle. Not all truth is revealed at once. Not all revelation is meant for every season. What is withheld is not denied forever. It is protected until readiness aligns with purpose. In this way, the Book of Enoch endured. It remained as witness rather than instruction, as memory rather than mandate. Its survival through restraint speaks as clearly as its words. This chapter begins the reflection on silence chosen over erasure. What was preserved quietly continued to shape understanding without commanding attention. The book waited, not forgotten, but held. As the centuries unfolded, the Book of Enoch moved along the edges of recorded tradition. It was neither central nor lost. Its presence remained quiet, known among scholars, scribes, and communities who treated sacred texts with measured care. The book did not disappear. It endured in margins rather than in assemblies. This endurance required discipline. To preserve a text without elevating it demands restraint. Those who held the writings understood that preservation alone was an act of responsibility. To copy faithfully without interpretation was to honor the text without reshaping it. In this way, the book was protected from alteration as much as from misuse. The reasons for its exclusion from later canons were not singular. They accumulated through reflection. The visions contained within the text were expansive, reaching into celestial order, angelic hierarchy, and judgment beyond human scale. Such material required context that could not be easily provided within communal worship or instruction. There was also concern for misdirection. The book speaks of watchers, binding, and cosmic structure in ways that could invite fixation rather than formation. Without careful grounding, readers might seek knowledge for curiosity rather than alignment. The restraint exercised by later traditions sought to prevent this imbalance. Complexity played a role as well. The language of the Book of Enoch is dense, layered, and symbolic. It resists simple reading. In communities tasked with preserving clarity and unity, such complexity posed risk. What is difficult to interpret can fracture understanding when shared broadly. Thus, the book was neither condemned nor dismissed. It was set aside. This distinction is essential. To set aside is to acknowledge value while limiting exposure. It is an act of stewardship rather than rejection. The memory of Enoch himself remained honored. He was remembered as one who walked faithfully and bore witness. His story endured within accepted texts, even as his writings remained separate. This separation preserved reverence without confusion. The Book of Enoch continued to influence thought indirectly. Its themes echoed in later writings. Its imagery shaped understanding at the edges, yet it did so without standing at the center. This position allowed its witness to remain intact without overpowering foundational teaching. The calm approach to its preservation reflects trust in timing. What is not needed immediately need not be discarded. What carries risk need not be destroyed. It can be held until wisdom determines its place. In this way, the book remained alive through restraint. Its survival did not depend on prominence. It depended on care. The silence surrounding it was not neglect, it was protection. This chapter of its history invites reflection. Preservation is not always loud. Truth is not always advanced through exposure. Sometimes it is honored through patience, waiting until the season of its use is clear. Thus the Book of Enoch continued, known yet quiet, present yet restrained, waiting not for validation, but for understanding aligned with purpose. Through the passing of ages, the Book of Enoch remained where it had been placed. It did not seek restoration to prominence, nor did it fade into obscurity. Its survival rested in balance, remembered by those who valued witness without demanding authority. The text's continued existence affirms that memory can endure without institution. What is preserved does not require elevation to remain alive. The Book of Enoch lived through careful transmission, not public endorsement. Its words were carried forward intact, awaiting readers capable of receiving them without distortion. This preservation invites reflection on the nature of revelation. Not all truth is intended to shape daily practice. Some truth stands as testimony to events beyond repetition. The visions of Enoch reveal order and consequence, not instruction for conduct. Their purpose is understanding, not imitation. Withholding such texts from central canon served protection on multiple levels. It guarded communities from misapplication. It preserved reverence by preventing overfamiliarity. It allowed mystery to remain where mystery belonged. The chapter does not present this restraint as loss. It presents it as care. What was set aside was not diminished. It was safeguarded. The silence surrounding the book preserved its integrity. In later times, the book would be rediscovered by some, studied by few, and approached with caution. This posture reflects wisdom rather than fear. The content demands patience. It resists haste. It cannot be absorbed without reflection. The Book of Enoch stands as an example of knowledge remembered yet restrained. It shows that truth can endure without dominance. It demonstrates that preservation does not require proclamation. This chapter closes by honoring the quiet survival of sacred memory. What has been revealed remains available. What has been withheld remains protected. The balance between the two reflects discernment shaped by time. Thus the book rests within history as witness, not command. It waits not for validation but for readiness. Its preservation stands as testimony that silence can be faithful and restraint can be an act of reverence. When the record reaches its end, it does not close with warning. It settles into order. The story preserved through the writings of Enoch moves from nearness to fracture, from fracture to judgment, and from judgment to restoration. This movement is not circular. It does not repeat itself. It completes what was begun. What follows judgment is not absence, but alignment regained. The boundaries once crossed are now held firm. Heaven and earth stand distinct, not distant, but rightly placed. The watchers remain bound. Their silence is complete. The knowledge once released without restraint no longer flows unchecked. What remains among humanity is sufficient, not excessive. This restoration is not reversal. What has been revealed cannot be undone. Memory remains. Knowledge remains. Yet both are now framed by humility. The story teaches that understanding alone does not preserve order. Restraint does. Timing does. Obedience does. The moral weight of the Enochic account rests here. It does not accuse. It instructs through outcome. Boundaries are shown not as limitations imposed in fear, but as structures that protect life. When boundaries are honored, creation flourishes. When they are crossed, imbalance spreads beyond intention. Obedience in this telling is not submission to force. It is alignment with design. The watchers were not judged because they desired understanding. They were judged because they acted beyond assignment. Humanity suffered not because it learned, but because it learned without readiness. Mercy is present throughout this restoration. Judgment restrained further corruption. Time was given for warning. Space was allowed for response. Even after cleansing, silence was extended. Mercy did not remove consequence, but it shaped its purpose. The order restored after the flood is quiet. There is no celebration recorded, no declaration of triumph. The earth resumes its place within rhythm. Seasons return. Life continues within renewed boundary. The sky above remains ordered. The ground below bears life again. This calm conclusion matters. It teaches that the end of disorder does not require noise. Restoration does not demand spectacle. True order returns gently, settling rather than asserting. Knowledge now stands within humility. What is known is held carefully. What is unknown is accepted without demand. The Book of Enoch itself rests within this posture, preserved, not promoted, remembered, not imposed. The story's final movement invites rest, not forgetfulness but peace. The listener is not urged toward fear or vigilance. The account closes beneath an ordered sky where boundaries hold and silence is not threat but shelter. The ancient voice does not press further. It allows stillness to complete the telling. What has been spoken is sufficient. What has been revealed has found its place. Order stands restored. Judgment has fulfilled its purpose. Mercy has shaped its outcome. The earth rests. The heavens remain aligned. And within this alignment, rest is given, not as escape, but as trust. The story ends where it must, not with urgency, but with quiet assurance that the order established before deviation has been reasserted, steady and enduring, holding all things within its care. With order restored, the world no longer presses forward in strain. It moves within measure. The story of Enoch does not conclude by expanding knowledge further, but by placing it within proper bounds. What has been revealed is sufficient. What remains hidden is not loss, but protection. The restored order does not erase freedom. It reframes it. Choice remains, but its weight is now visible. The record has shown that freedom without boundary fractures creation, while freedom within design preserves it. This understanding does not demand constant vigilance. It invites trust. The silence that follows judgment is not emptiness. It is alignment made audible through stillness. The heavens do not speak because they no longer need to correct. The earth does not cry because it is no longer strained. Silence becomes the sign of harmony. Patience returns as the guiding rhythm. Time is no longer accelerated by excess or fear. Growth unfolds without urgency. Knowledge is approached with care. The story teaches that restraint is not the absence of wisdom, but its completion. Mercy remains woven into this restored state. The consequences of earlier transgression were not erased, yet they were contained. The earth was cleansed, not abandoned. Humanity continued, not discarded. The purpose of judgment was fulfilled without destroying what could still live. This balance between justice and mercy defines the final tone. There is no warning left to speak. What needed to be revealed has been revealed. What needed to be corrected has been corrected. The narrative rests because its work is complete. The Book of Enoch, as witness to this movement, stands quietly within history. Its presence mirrors the ending it describes. It remains without demand, without urgency, without insistence. It offers understanding to those who seek it patiently. The story does not ask for response. It allows rest. The listener is not called to action but to stillness. The weight of knowledge is set down. The need to resolve is released. Order has been restored and rest follows naturally. This rest is not sleep born of forgetting. It is peace born of alignment. The world no longer leans toward collapse. It stands within design. The sky above holds its place. The earth below carries life without strain. Thus the narrative slows fully. It does not end abruptly. It settles. The ancient voice recedes into silence, not because it has nothing more to say, but because nothing more is required. The story of boundaries crossed and restored closes with assurance rather than caution. The listener is left beneath an ordered sky, where silence is shelter, patience is sufficient, and rest is not escape, but trust within a world held once again in balance. In the final stillness, the weight of the story settles where it belongs. Nothing presses forward. Nothing calls out. What has been ordered remains ordered, not because it is guarded by force, but because it is held within design. The heavens do not withdraw. They remain attentive yet quiet. The earth does not strive upward. It rests within its place. Between them the boundary stands firm, no longer threatened, no longer tested. This firmness does not feel restrictive. It feels complete. The account of Enoch reaches its true conclusion here, not in words but in condition. The movement from nearness to transgression, from transgression to judgment, and from judgment to restoration has come to rest. Nothing remains unresolved. Nothing seeks continuation. Knowledge remains among humanity, yet it no longer seeks dominance. What is known is approached with humility. What is unknown is left undisturbed. Curiosity no longer demands crossing. Wisdom now includes restraint. This posture preserves peace. It allows life to unfold without strain. The earth continues within rhythm. Seasons return without fear. Growth resumes without excess. Silence is not absence of meaning, but evidence of harmony. The moral weight of the story does not rest in warning, but in understanding. Boundaries are not threats, they are shelter. Obedience is not loss of freedom. It is alignment with what sustains life. Mercy is not weakness. It is patience shaped by purpose. The Book of Enoch itself reflects this ending. It remains preserved, not elevated. Known, not imposed. Its place within history mirrors the order restored within the world it describes. It stands as witness, not command. Nothing more is required. The story does not press the listener toward vigilance or fear. It invites rest. The work of correction has been completed. The weight of consequence has been carried. The balance holds. The ancient voice does not close with instruction. It fades into stillness. This stillness is the final gift of the telling. It allows the mind to settle and the soul to release what has been held. Under an ordered sky, with boundaries restored and silence returned, rest is given freely. The world stands secure within its design. The story ends not because it has been exhausted, but because it has been fulfilled. Here in this quiet alignment, the telling comes to rest. The telling now rests. What was hidden has been named. What was broken has been traced. What was judged has been restored to order. The ancient record does not remain to disturb the mind, but to settle it. It leaves behind no demand, no urgency, no weight yet to be carried. Only understanding placed gently within silence. The heavens remain ordered. The earth remains within its bounds. Memory endures without pressing forward. Knowledge remains without reaching beyond its place. Nothing more is required. The age has turned. The story has completed its course. What once moved through conflict now rests within design. And so the voice withdraws, not into absence but into stillness. The same stillness that followed the waters. The same stillness that guards what is set apart. Under an ordered sky, with boundaries holding firm. Rest is given. Here the record closes.